Should we just cover the ground rules or should we wait? What do you think, Gary?
Well, yeah, once you go over the ground rules, make it easy and latecomers can pick up.
Can try and follow along, guys. Social cues. Okay, super. So just amongst those who are elected and appointed, there's 25 of us tonight, which is a lot of people. So we wanted to put just a little bit of structure to the discussion tonight. So the school committee will open their meeting and then each board will have an opportunity to open their meeting. If you're the chair of a board or committee, if you could just announce the names of the people that are here so that the recording secretaries can write them out and get them in appropriately. Also, the school committee will present first and give you just sort of a rough breakout of some of our challenges for the year and how things are going and what we're looking for going forward. Then we'll have an opportunity for Wenham present and then an opportunity for Hamilton to present information. And then we'll go around by board or committee and ask our questions. But we're gonna kind of have it like each person can really only ask their questions once. So try and make it impactful and worthwhile and try and limit that, you know, those questions to within like 3 minutes or so. That way we can all get out of here within a decent amount of time. So for the formalities of this meeting is being recorded and being held remotely due to the Governor Baker's emergency order. And that all votes, if votes are taken, which I don't believe will be made by roll call. I'm calling to order the Hamilton Wenham Regional School Committee, including Dana Alara, Julia Campbell, Michelle Horrigan, Anna Cizik, David Polito, and Peter Walczyk, and Michelle Bailey. Would you like to go next, Wenham Board of Selectmen?
Yeah, so Jackie, do we have John Clemenzi up online here?
Nikki and I are working on Selectman Clemenzi, so maybe if we can pass and come back.
All right, so
Thank you.
So pass.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll pass to the Wenham FinCom.
So we'll call the Wenham Finance Committee to order at 7:08 p.m. Attending is Alex Bagan, David Molentano, and Susan Malin.
Super. And then for the Hamilton Board of Selectmen.
So I will call the Hamilton Board of Selectmen for December 17th to order. Myself is here, Sean Farrell. I see Darcy Dale is present, Jamie Knudsen, and I think that's all we have at the moment.
Super. And the Hamilton FinCom.
I will call the Hamilton Finance and Advisory Committee to order on December 17th. We have in attendance David Wanger, Nick Tenson, Christina Shank-Hargrove, and myself, John Prulidge. Valerie McCormick is not in attendance right now, but she will be joining us later.
Fantastic. And then could the members who work for the Hamilton Wenham School Committee introduce themselves? You want to go first, Superintendent? And
Mute. You're
on
muted.
mute. It's 2020.
Sorry about that, folks. Good evening, Mary Beth Banyos, Superintendent, Hamilton Wenham Regional School District.
Super. And Vincent?
Vincent Leone, Assistant Superintendent of Finance and Administration.
Great. Tom? Is he still there? And then I'm sorry that I have not met you, Miss Colon. I don't know how to say your first name.
It's Jamie.
Jamie, super. And did you want to introduce yourself? Because you're the fresh face in the group.
My name is Jamie,
apologize.
Finance Director, Town Accountant for Wenham.
Jamie is our new finance director. She's been with us for about 4 weeks now, and we welcome her very much to the position.
Awesome.
Welcome.
And Joe?
Joe Domolowitz, Town Manager, Town of Hamilton. Thanks for having me.
And is your finance director here?
No, Marissa's not joining us tonight. She was a finance committee meeting last night. I asked her to take the night off.
Great, awesome. So with that, we're going to turn it over to Mary Beth and Vincent Leone to present our budget information. If everyone wants to mute their mics for now, that will give you better reception and in case anything's going on in your background.
Good evening, everybody. Again, we are looking forward to sharing some preliminary information from the Hamilton Wenham Regional School District. I did want to share with folks some what I would call see and hear data as I have entered as the new superintendent. And one of the things that I have seen and heard stories about is that through the budget process, the school district is moving forward and developing a budget, and the towns are looking to have the school committee come in at a certain point. And that conversation about whether or not those two things align often appears to be happening more later in the process, around April. And part of what we would love to facilitate this evening is a conversation about starting that conversation about a common target for increases that seems to work for all of us, and talking about that this evening, as opposed to having parallel processes take off and then find ourselves in very different positions later in the spring. So that's a general thought that we'd like to offer and throw out to everybody. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Vinny to do some initial presentation around the district's finance.
Mary Beth, can I just share the screen?
You should be able to, Vinny. I did
Okay.
set it up that way.
So thank you to everyone for joining us tonight. We're here to kick off our FY22 budget discussions. And I'm going to focus on two major areas. I promise to be brief so everyone can go back to shoveling. I know there's a lot of snow, so my back hurts as well. But the two major areas of focus tonight is the FY22 enrollment assessment. And we're going to walk through what we're currently projecting for our revenues. So for the enrollment, the regional school district saw a reduction of nearly 135 students this year. We predict this is obviously because of COVID-19. We saw a lot of students either leave and enroll in a private school, or they chose to homeschool. One or the two was the biggest areas. The greatest reduction was at Hamilton. Sorry about that. And we saw a reduction of approximately 58 students. So for this year, the October 1st SIMS report shows about 1,072 students in total. And for Wenham, it's approximately 558, and that is a reduction of nearly 77 students. Now we're seeing a bigger reduction of students leave Wenham as opposed to leaving Hamilton, which has resulted in an enrollment shift towards Hamilton of approximately $138,000. So this would be the new enrollment assessment for FY22. The new 3-year average is 64.44% for Hamilton and 35.56% for Wenham. It's a shift of approximately 0.58%. You can see here on this chart that if you take your FY21 total operating assessment and you were to simply apply the new 3-year rolling average, you can see the $183,000 shift from Hamilton towards Wenham. So what I tried.
Just quickly before you move on, I did want to share with folks our revenue stream from Chapter 70 is based on enrollment. So one of the things that all public school districts are sitting with right now, all districts saw a drop in enrollment this year. Again, through either students enrolling in private schools or homeschooling. We are anticipating those students coming back next year, but currently the Chapter 70 formula would be based on our enrollments for this year. There is a lot of advocacy going on at the state level to ensure that our Chapter 70 monies are not cut, because we saw a drop of enrollment this year, but that is one of the areas that is volatile, and we're not sure where that is going to land.
Do we ask questions now? Hi, it's David from Wenham FinCom. Do we ask questions now or wait till the end of the presentation? Which would you prefer?
Yeah.
Let's wait. Yeah, let's wait till the end, and then everyone will get a chance to ask their questions all at once.
Great, thanks, Michelle.
Okay, so what I tried to do here was set up what the new enrollment shift would mean if for every half-point increment increase on our operating budget. So you can see here again the $183,000 shift to Hamilton and away from Wenham. So if our net operating budget did not increase whatsoever, and we saw a 0% increase year over year, you would still see an increase of $183,000 towards Hamilton, which represents approximately 0.91% increase for Hamilton, or a 1.6% reduction for Wenham. So at each half point increment, you can see kind of what the total increase is for each town, or decrease if you talk about Wenham and under 1.5%. So now I'm just going to move on to our current revenue projections. The state did update their budget, so these numbers will change a little bit, mostly state transportation that I'll explain in a second, but these are what we're currently projecting for revenues. I'm not going to walk through all of them, but you can see, I'll just go through a couple of the big ones. School choice, we've actually seen a reduction in school choice. It's kind of the same idea. Because of COVID, a lot of students chose to either stay at their home district, or maybe even school choice out somewhere else, or again, do homeschool or go to a private school. So we actually saw right now for FY21, we're seeing a reduction of approximately 12 students. And right now we have a big senior class. So for FY22, that senior class will be graduating, and a smaller 6th grade class will be coming in. So right now we're projecting approximately $101,000 reduction for school choice. For preschool tuition, it's kind of again linked to COVID. We saw a reduction this year of approximately $60,000. So for this year, we budgeted $95,000 for preschool tuition. But what we found happen as soon as COVID-19 hit, a lot of parents withdrew their preschool child and decided to either just wait another year to enroll them in kindergarten, or even wait another year after that. So we're actually realizing a deficit this year from this revenue account of approximately $60,000. We think this will kind of go away with FY22 in the hopes that COVID-19 is kind of past us, but we think that there might be residual effects on it, and it's still a slight decrease in enrollment from what we previously projected. Another big one is circuit breaker. This was circuit breaker, Chapter 70, and state regional transportation reimbursement were all reduced during our FY21 budget cycle of approximately 20%. So for Chapter 70, right now we're using a figure of about 95%. So like Mary Beth said, it's based on our enrollment this year. So with our reduction this year, we don't anticipate seeing it level funded since our enrollment did decrease. So right now we're using about a 95% figure, which would show an increase of about $585,000 year over year. Another big ticket decrease that we're seeing is within Medicaid. That's the same kind of story as preschool in terms of what we're seeing this year. This year we had a budget of about $95,000. Right now we've only received, I believe, $15,000, and we don't predict we're going to get anywhere near $95,000 before the year ends. So we're carrying that into next year and predicting the same thing. This isn't due to COVID-19, but it has to do with the state really getting stricter on what kind of reimbursements we can submit for. So we're seeing a decline in that area as well. The last major one on there is excess and deficiency. So as most of you know, last year, FY20 ended so close to budget that there wasn't a lot of funds left over to be added into our excess and deficiencies. So right now we're running at about, I believe, 2.8% E&D. Anything over 3% has to be returned to the towns. So for FY22, Sally, there's no excess and deficiency to add in. So that's showing a decrease of approximately 217,000. But overall, year over year, we're seeing an increase of approximately 6% on our total revenues for the year. So that's kind of the end of my brief presentation. I will stop sharing so we can all see each other. So I figure it out.
Thank you, Vinny. So I guess it probably wouldn't be a bad idea to take the questions on this now. So did anyone on the school committee want to ask a question? Anna?
Thanks, Michelle. Thank you, Vinny. The slide you showed in terms of what the percentage increase would be for the towns based on increases to the FY22 budget. Am I reading it right that there's sort of if we go anything over a 1.5% increase, then that's going to be in Hamilton triggering over that 2.5% increase there? I just wanted to make sure I understand sort of like what the limit is. I wrote it down quickly. It seemed like a 1.5 increase would be a 2.42 increase to Hamilton, but a very slight decrease in Wenham. But if you go to a 2% budget increase, then at Hamilton, we're looking at a 2.93% increase, and Wenham would be a 0.36. Am I interpreting that chart correctly?
Yep, exactly correctly. Anything over 1.5 would translate into a increase of about 2.5% for Hamilton.
And then that would trigger an override, right?
They could probably answer that question better than me.
Okay.
We'll let them have that one.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, thank you.
We know the Wenham FinCom had a question, so why don't we go to them next?
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. I just had a quick question as I was looking. We had a reduction of 100 and what students?
135.
135. How many of those students do we know percentage-wise stayed home due to COVID, and how many found new schools?
I don't know that. Do you know that, Mary Beth?
We had a report for the homeschooling, so I can give you the homeschooling number. I'm just going to have to take a minute to look that up.
Okay, thank you.
Jackie, John Clemenzi should be on now.
All right,
Okay, that's,
then.
Michelle, I think he's in the attendee pool. If you could have him brought in. Thank you. Sorry for the interruption.
Who is it that needs to come over?
John Clemenzi.
Okay, hold on.
Yeah, so Dave, I know that report was given to us in October. So we'll look that up, and actually we can get that.
Would it be on the website, Michelle? I'm trying to multi-screen with multiple documents. Would it be on the website?
Yeah, it'd be on the website under school committee.
Under school committee, and then under meetings and agendas. And I do believe it was the first meeting in October.
Okay.
And it would be then in our agendas and packets. So.
All right, thank you.
Right. Is there any other Wenham FinCom members who would like to ask a question at this point?
just a quick question, Vinny.
Yeah, of course.
Jim Purdy.
How you doing?
On the Chapter 70 aid, did you say that was, if I understood it or heard it correctly, that was a little bit of a soft number? You weren't too sure about it? Did I hear that incorrectly? Or?
Yep, we're using about a 95% calculation. So this year, I believe it's about 3.7 million, and I think I have 3.5. That's mainly due because of our enrollment, though. So like Mary Beth said, Chapter 70 is based on our foundation enrollment. So if there's a decrease in our enrollment, there's a good chance that there'll be a decrease in our funding as well.
So this number, if I interpret that, then is a conservative number.
Correct. I always try to be conservative in all my
Okay.
revenue numbers, just so
Okay,
you know.
Right, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as you know, the school committee usually budgets a level funding over, but we feel like because the enrollment's lower, our true level funding is 95%. Anybody from the Wenham Board of Selectmen have a question?
Then, as I see John on, let me call the Wenham Board of Selectmen meeting to order at 7:26 on administrative note. And do we, for the question, do we have any information on what adjustments have been made due to COVID as far as increased or decreased expenses?
For this year, is that what you're
Yes,
asking?
the current year, what for this year, what's it going to look like next year for those expenses?
Are you talking for fiscal year 22?
Yes.
It's hard to tell at this point because, part of the expenses that we see are PPE. So will we still be in a situation where that's going to be required, like masking and that type of thing? So that could have an impact on materials that we will need. I right now would anticipate that would be the most likely additional expense. Unfortunately for all of us, the situation is fluid and somewhat unpredictable, but we are hoping for a close to normal opening in the fall. But there are certainly scenarios that would cause us to have additional expenses related to COVID management.
All right, thank you.
Vinny, anything you want to add to that?
I was going to say, if I could add to it, one other item that might affect us next year is the extension of the FFCRA Act. So right now, employees can go out on a paid leave and earn a portion of their salary, but that's set to expire on December 30th. If the government extends that, depending on how long they extend it for, if it goes into obviously next September, it could affect us in 22.
Hamilton FinCom, did anybody have a question?
I had a brief sort of follow-up to Jim's question. You had mentioned that the Chapter 78, since it's based on enrollment, so is the FY22 Chapter 70 number based on FY22 enrollment, or is it prior year enrollment?
Current.
Yeah,
Okay, it's current enrollment. And then, so then the FY21 number is lower because of the decrease in enrollment. You mentioned that there might be lobbying going on so that this number doesn't actually decrease based on what we hope is just a temporary.
Yes, I know my organization, MASS, is lobbying pretty hard for that. This, again, is a scenario that we're seeing across all school districts, and it could have a pretty significant impact on the budget. So yes, there is a fair amount of lobbying going on. And
are you, Mary Beth, thank you. Are you seeing across other school districts a similar drop in enrollment, in that sort of, almost 10% kind of range?
Yeah, the numbers that we're experiencing here are comparable. I think we have a few more students that have gone to private school than other districts, but the homeschooling numbers are fairly aligned with what other districts are seeing.
Great, thank you.
Okay, and Hamilton Board of Selectmen, did you have questions?
Not so much a question, just more of a kind of comment when we're talking about the Chapter 70 and enrollment numbers. Mary Beth, you and I think Anna, a handful of months ago, kind of went around with some emails about just that and lobbying at the state level. I've had a few conversations with our state reps, and they're for helping us out in keeping the numbers going based on last year's numbers. So whatever our Board of Selectmen can do in supporting the school administration and school committee by sending letters and talking to our representatives, please let us know, and we'll definitely help out because it affects all of us.
Great, thank you.
Okay, I think that was the complete round robin. So who from Wenham would like to present?
So what we'll do, Michelle, is Jackie Bresnahan, Director of Administrative Services, will run through. We have about 15 slides. It shouldn't take too long. And then I just want to follow it up with some remarks and then possible other comments from FinCom members. Is that okay?
That sounds great. So Mary Beth, Jackie will need to have the ability to share screen.
Yeah, I've set it up so all panelists can share. So Jackie, you should be all set.
Thank you all. So as Jim said, I'm Jackie Bresnahan, Director of Administrative Services. So just to quickly run you through where we're starting off for fiscal 22 at this point in the year. Sorry. So we're now currently looking at our current and past budget drivers. As all of you know, the HWRSD is one for us. Thankfully, we're going to see the relief side of the enrollment shift a little bit this year, but that's been a big driver for us in years past. We're looking right now at limited revenue growth from local receipts and new growth. We're seeing increases on our required spending, including our pensions and health insurance. We're struggling with a lack of capital and infrastructure investment, and we're still trying to deal with the response to COVID-19, including operational changes, very close revenue tracking. And we expect that at some point during this spring, maybe even as early as January, February, we'll go into a spending freeze as we did last spring in FY20 as in response to the pandemic and the fiscal challenges. Our prior year budget strategies, not anything new, but we're trying to reduce our use of free cash to balance the budget. We're continuing to face a structural deficit year after year. And so we are trying to back that free cash out of the budget as best we can while still meeting all of our needs for general government and for the school district so that we can move forward. We've struggled with capital investment, as I mentioned, and we've struggled with investment in other reserves. We've been relying a lot on grants, and I will commend our department heads because they look and apply for every grant available and are doing a great job of receiving a lot of those grants. But we're also struggling because we've not seen a significant increase to our stabilization fund since 2001. We're looking to better utilize and implement the DOR and GFOA's best practices, including depleting our use of free cash. Every year, free cash is going down. We're plugging it into our budget. It's not regenerating as much. So we're really trying to focus on that over the coming years. We don't want to draw down too far on our reserves, which are already quite low because we are really conscientious of the impact of our credit rating. We also struggle at this point. Our reserves don't even make up for 2 months of operating expenses, which is about 17% of our budget. So we're looking to try to be better about putting some money towards our savings so that when difficult years like this come up, we're not relying just on our local property tax and the use of free cash. Moving forward, as I can't say it enough that we're trying to eliminate the free cash, but we've limited excess levy capacity. We're trying to review and update a lot of our financial policies so that we have guidelines in place for addressing a lot of these issues. And something that we've been discussing with our audit committee as well as the finance and advisory committee and the select board is maintaining our bond rating by implementing these best practices. So we had some expense increase assumptions building into our discussions for our joint meeting last week and tonight. Expenses, we're seeing a 0 to 1.5% for most departments in terms of our current assumption. Personnel, which is about 2 to 4%, which includes current contracts, our non-union employee merit program, and we're still working on the library contract. So hopefully we'll be able to incorporate that in our next round of numbers. We're going to see at least a 4 to 5% increase in our pension obligations, as well as an 8% on our health insurance. So those cost drivers come up every year, and we expect them to be in about that range this year. This current budget, just to give you a sense of where we are in terms of affordability, we assumed no increase in the Essex Tech enrollment and a 3% net operating increase. And we assumed currently a 3% net operating increase on the school side. This doesn't factor in the enrollment shift as we've just recently gotten those numbers. So in the coming weeks, we'll start to get a better sense of where that's coming. And I do want to echo Mary Beth's comments. It is great that we're talking more at this point in the process. I've been on the Wenham budget team for a few years now, so I really appreciate you saying that because I think it's important that we all start communicating as early as possible about where we're going to be. And then just to quickly look, similar to as Vinny mentioned, being really conservative in revenue projections for fiscal 22. This just gives a summary of where some of our more specific revenue are, and this is on our website as well. But we're keeping our new growth very static, and we've really recalibrated our local receipts. We have roughly $2 to $3 million in local receipts in a given year. And with the pandemic, a lot of those numbers are going to be affected. So we've been pretty conservative based on state guidance and economic trends. We're looking at state aid for 21 at the reoccurrence of what we did see in 20. But we're right now budgeting fiscal 22 at a 20% reduction. It's not a huge part of our revenue portfolio, but we do want to be mindful of trying to be conservative. And this current projection that I'm sharing with you tonight doesn't include any use of free cash. So that'll be a factor down the road as the FinCom and Select Board continue to deliberate. So this is just an overview of those additional assumptions. The one I want to point out to everyone at this point is right now we're also looking at minimal additional aid for continued pandemic response. So that's something we're trying to think about as we go into 22 as well. Hopefully we will see some additional support from our state and federal officials, but at this point in time, we're being conservative and trying to think about our ways to be creative to still cover our COVID response appropriately, including contact tracing and PPE and all of those other needs, but trying to also still do our regular operations and provide services to residents. So our preliminary budget forecast looks at roughly $21,700,000 in estimated revenue and $22,300,000 in change in projected appropriations. So right now that's an approximate structural deficit of $650,000. And we're still waiting. We've asked all of our department heads for their initial submittals, and myself and Jamie and our interim town administrator, Tom Younger, have met with all the department heads. So we expect those budgets to be presented to the FinCom and Select Board on January 9th. But their requests, anything above those assumptions we've made, have not been incorporated into our numbers thus far. We're right now only estimating approximately $975,000 in free cash from fiscal 20. So for fiscal 22, off the top of that, we'll put some into our reserves for our financial policies, but it'll be a lower number that we could use at any point in time for subsidizing the operating budget, which is not ideal, or for our capital or other one-time outlays. And this is just showing our use of free cash over the last few years in the operating budget. It is significant. So the free cash coming down every year is a huge impact for us in terms of having a very conservative year for revenue with the pandemic, and then not being able to rely on this free cash, A, because it's not a best practice, and B, because it's really not there the way it's been in prior years. And this just shows you that free cash over time as well in terms of how much it was certified at versus how much we've been using to subsidize the operating budget. Lastly, we're looking at a lot of different opportunities to balance the budget. We're very restricted with our revenue, and most of it be coming from our local property tax, but we're hoping to discuss with Hamilton the recreation IMA. We're going to continue to discuss trash fees or other ways to look at approaching trash and how to fund it. Obviously, we have the option of the Proposition 2.5 override, and we're hoping at some point in the next few years to begin master planning. Obviously, that's a very long-term goal, but with such a residential tax base, it's a really critical need in terms of understanding how we could move forward with any mixed-use commercial development, and hearing about what the residents want and how they would want us to approach those challenges and make edits to the zoning bylaw to get there. So that's something we're definitely going to continue the conversation about this year. In terms of expense decreases, we're hoping to talk with Hamilton about regionalization, talk with the schools about whatever we can do to create cost efficiencies. We're going to continue to keep an eye on our own health insurance, and we're going to be discussing some planned or scheduled service reductions if we do get to a point where we're trying to find where we can make cuts. We want to do so in a thoughtful way so that if the Select Board and FinCom do decide to go with a policy for an override and there are town services as part of that, it's something that we're going to be prepared to handle the service reduction for if the override doesn't pass. So that's where we are for that. And we just included this on our website as well in terms of where we are in a general schedule. So that's on our website for folks if they want to reference where we are in the process.
Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you,
Great.
Jackie.
Jim, you had some comments, right?
Thank you, Jackie. Yeah, I'm just going to reiterate a few of the highlights of Jackie's statement. I think probably, as most folks know, our room in our levy limit is very thin. It has been for the past several years, and this year is not going to be any different. In addition to that, as we've indicated, we're going to really try to change our policy on the use of free cash. We recently had our audit, which emphasized that the audit emphasized our use of free cash and the potential impact on our credit bond rating, which is very good at the present time, but we don't want to see that compromised. So not using free cash is our goal this year. It's an ambitious goal, but it's one that we're going to try to implement. Let's see. The other issue of not using free cash for operations is to invest in our stabilization funds. As Jackie mentioned, it's been almost 18 years since we've invested in that. We have very little room for capital planning, health insurance, personnel, those kinds of very baseline critical issues that we kind of move from year to year and try to meet and address. But it's a real challenge when we don't have a robust stabilization fund. Jackie, I don't believe mentioned, we have a new twist this year in revenue potential, revenue loss going into fiscal year 22. Maybe some of the folks in Hamilton are aware that we have businesses at the Iron Rail. A few of those businesses that produce revenue for us are experiencing loss of business and have fallen behind, unfortunately, in their rental income to the town of Wenham. And so we're looking at potentially for this year around an $80,000 plus loss of revenue, which to us is significant. As you know, we don't have many businesses in town, so it's a fairly noticeable loss for us. The other issue I just want to say generally is that our goal this year is, last year we had one of the first overrides since 1982 or 83 for town operations. If that override hadn't passed, we would have been significantly impacted with the loss of personnel in police, fire, DPW, town hall administration. We want to try to meet our commitments, our financial commitments within our levy limit and our other sources of revenue, as opposed to overrides this year. That is a goal, and we will be working hard to try to achieve that. Thank you very much. Other FinCom members, comments? What did we leave out, or any further questions?
No.
Nope. Jackie, Jim, I think you both got all the major points. Thanks a lot.
All right.
Great. So then, did school committee members have any questions for the Wenham FinCom? I just have one on limited new growth. My observation of just in and around my neighborhood is there's been a lot of new growth. I was just curious if that limited new growth is based on actual permits filled or if you're just using a percentage.
Michelle, it's a really good question. So I've been discussing it with Steve Ozahowski, who's our principal assessor in Wenham. He's also on the Board of Assessors in Hamilton, so a familiar face to many. The challenge is, so we have had a wonderful year of permits. I can say that the volume has been very high, but in terms of what the DOR will collect for new growth is a different definition. So by nature, normal permitting behavior, not all of that is significant enough to contribute to new growth. There's a minimum standard. So new construction is a very clear indicator of new growth, but renovations and additions have to be to a certain volume, a certain capacity to meet the threshold for adding to a town's new growth. So while a lot of folks have been in their homes DIYing it and doing other projects, it doesn't add up as much as we would like it to under the DOR parameters.
Super. Did anyone from the Hamilton Board of Selectmen want to ask a question? And how about the Hamilton FinCom?
Nothing from me.
And did the Wenham Board of Selectmen want to ask a question? I know you met recently and how,
I think we have this all covered beforehand, so we're good.
great, fantastic.
Hey,
So-
Michelle.
Yes,
Sorry, since we're moving quickly through it, I'll just throw one comment out if you don't mind. So, because it's a good question ahead on new growth, just to throw a couple numbers out, our levy limit increase is roughly 400,000 based on a Prop 2.5 on an annual basis. And then I think we typically budget around 150 to 200,000 for new growth. So it just gives you an idea. Obviously, that being a key contributor to levy increases, levy limit increases year to year, coupled with 2.5. I just figured I'd put those out there. So call it 600,000 additional levy limit per year on average. Obviously, very rough numbers for Wenham's levy limit. Thanks.
super. And who from Hamilton would like to speak about sort of where you are in your process and what you're thinking? Great, looks like Joe.
Hi, thanks. I did not prepare a PowerPoint. I was hoping that I was expecting this to just be more of a discussion. And I was glad to have the information from Jackie, though. Thank you to Mary Beth. I did ask Marissa to prepare a brief revenue estimate for FY22 for us. So that's what you see up here. As you can see at the top of the form, our previous levy limit for FY21 was $29,991,000. We're expecting about $750,000 in Proposition 2.5 growth, and we're estimating new growth at about $200,000. We're confident in that number that we rose that to $200,000 last year. We had typically held the number around $150,000 in the past, but we let it go up a little because we knew that part of Canterbrook was coming online, and that number has shown out to hold this year as about half of Canterbrook has come online. So we've been meeting our new growth number, and we have the other half coming online this year. That project's on track and on schedule. So we feel comfortable maintaining the new growth estimate for this year at $200,000. So that would give us a current levy limit of about $30,941,761. As you know, I think we've covered this with you folks in the past. Last year, due to the way the budget grew, the town of Hamilton had several $100,000 of levy capacity. We no longer have that. I believe we're right around $100,000 or less. It's actually less. I think it's $64,000 of levy capacity this year. So anything in addition to what we spent last year, over 64,000, and our new growth is going to challenge us. If you can scroll down a little bit, Mary Beth, we can just talk about some of these other things. You'll see in local receipts, we've estimated about 10 to 15%. I think I asked Marissa to estimate a 15% reduction in state aid based on just the general temperature of things. We're trying to be conservative in our estimate. We fortunately did not get hurt with a revenue decrease in the current year's budget when it finally passed. So only about $10,000 or $15,000 difference. We can easily absorb that, but we're not expecting the same luck this year. The state's revenue is way down, and they're going to have to find some place to balance it. So we're projecting a 10 to 15% decrease in state aid. And across the board, we projected decreases in motor vehicle excise tax and other local receipts, such as inspectional fees and things, and permits and licenses and things. The reason for that is just the general state of the economy, the inability of people to move around, go out to dinner. We did see our inspectional services fees maintain this year, similar to what Wenham saw. And a lot of DIY, a lot of do-it-yourselfers, and a lot of them pulled permits, which we appreciate. So we get down to total revenue. We do not use free cash. It's a fiscal policy to not use free cash in our operational budget. The town went away from that several years ago. It has been adopted as a policy, and we're projecting to stick with that. So zero free cash in our projected revenues. That would give us an anticipated total revenue of about $34,312,712 for FY22. Again, this is just it's an early draft estimate. If you looked at last year's school budget and last year's total budget, Below it, you would see that we are actually projecting about $500,000 less revenue in the coming fiscal year than what we had last year. So the Hamilton Wenham Regional School District made up about just under 59% of our spending last year. We're around 62 or 64% when you add in the Essex, the regional school, the other expenses for schools, but you're about 59%. So, if we were to project a similar level of spending, 59, 60% on the schools, then we'd be a slight reduction. It'd be about 20,200,000, which is about 200,000 or so less than what we actually spent on the schools in the current year. So we're anticipating this being a very, very difficult budget year. We're at the very beginning of our process. Our department heads don't turn in their budget requests to me until next week. And we're compiling the capital requests tomorrow. So we're a little early in the budget year this year because we've moved out town meeting. So we're not quite as prepared to go through where we're seeing our money go next year. But I would say that we had last year, in anticipation or because of the pandemic and the recession, we cut town spending by about $500,000, but that impacted services. We made severe cuts in several areas and programmatic areas, particularly in the public works and a couple of other outward-facing departments that have had a negative impact on the way our residents see our town. So we're looking to try to find a way to bring some of those services back, some of those programs back. We had problems that we want to address in our cemetery and in our parks and just the way we, take care of ourselves. So we need to try and find a way to bring that back to pre-pandemic levels as well. So that'll be a challenge. We're projecting about a 7 to 9% increase in employee health insurance. So that'll be something that we're going to have to deal with as well. Again, sorry that we are a little early. I don't have all the numbers for you, but I do feel this conversation is helpful, just for us to all get a sense of how we're coming into this. We've talked with the FinCom and the Board of Selectmen about the possible need to do an override this year, and they're aware of it for operational purposes to cover our expenses. And it'll be the first time in a long time that it's happened in Hamilton. If it has happened, but it'll be one that we need to work through together. So I don't know if my board or my FinCom want to add or take shots at me for saying all that out loud, but
yeah, I'd be happy to add just on top of Joe's comments that certainly heading into this year we are really facing that possibility of a Prop 2.5 override, and without any excess levy capacity, and also facing reduced revenue, our tax rate's going to be affected even if we avoid a Prop 2.5 override. But this is certainly highlighted for us as we look at, okay, even if we can stay just year over year close to that 2.5%, 3% from the school, when you look at the change in enrollment and the apportionment, that in itself is going to make it even more challenging for us. We'd really love to avoid an override, and as Joe mentioned, very strict about not using free cash for operational expenses. So I will certainly reiterate, it's going to be a very challenging year for us.
Hamilton Board of Selectmen.
I'm sorry.
I don't want to kind of beat a dead horse here, but I think John and Joe summed it up pretty well. We're early in the budget cycle, and we're going to really have to kind of sharpen our pencils this year to try and even get close to a number that we like. And that number, compounded with the school number, is always kind of a tricky thing, so we're hoping that these dialogues and conversations can continue to happen through both of our budget cycles. Hamilton has a capital committee, and they meet fairly regularly. I know they've met with the school committee before. And part of our our spending is on capital projects. I know the school has kind of a big laundry list and some priorities on it, and our towns do as well. And hopefully our Capcom can meet with either the whole school committee or members of it and discuss kind of our future cast for that capital spending and try and help balance it out over the years and work with Wenham as well, so that we're not spiking kind of back and forth on these big capital asks, because a lot of these projects on their capital needs are needs, they're not really wants. So, we kind of, I think, have to work all together with all these different, it's all one revenue source, right? It's all the citizens. So, we need to figure out some different revenue streams. We need to figure out how to kind of spread out these debts and kind of level the playing field a little bit with our increases in our taxes, so that our citizens can bear it without too many overrides.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Can I just real quick add to that? We do have a couple of things going on that I forgot to mention. Obviously, the town of Hamilton, the town meeting this year in the fall approved some money for us to do a master plan. I know Michelle and Mary Beth have talked about this with you. You got money in the budget and last year to do some school master planning. So I'd really like us to kind of align those. I know that Tom Younger and I have talked about Wenham participating in our master planning process to keep us all on the same page and make sure that we're all aware of what each other has going on. We do try to do capital planning and capital expenditures every year, but generally we spend money from outside the operational budget on those. And that's something we still have to get a handle on. Some of our capital requests are pretty big. And we know that you have capital requests that are big and others that are coming down the road. It'd be the sooner that we can start to forecast when we can bring those online, and as debt rolls off in each town, it makes it easier for the taxpayer. It makes it easier for the tax rate if we're anticipating when those happen. Several of your large projects are going to take many years in planning. I think that we need to make sure that the residents in both towns and the school age residents in particular are aware that there's planning that goes into that and make them aware of what that calendar is. We're trying to address all those things. We're also in Hamilton going to be looking at some potential reorganization of departments and some reallocation of duties to try to become a little bit more efficient and at the same time provide better services. Our health department obviously stepped up to the plate and did really, really good, considering that they were dramatically understaffed. And I'm thankful for the people that we had working for us and the people that we had in the Board of Health volunteering for us, but we need to do a better job of predicting how that workload can rise and fall and plan for it better. So we're going to be working on that this year. Happy to talk to Wenham and let them know what we're doing or what we're thinking of doing. So if there's a way to plug in there, I know Jackie's slide had talked about more regionalization, so I'm happy to let you know what we're thinking about. And I just like us all to continue to work together this way. So
yeah, I would just mention one more thing. I'll kind of piggyback on what Joe was saying about the kind of capital projects and what I was leading into a little bit. We recently had a 3-year kind of design and bid process with our town hall. It went to a debt exclusion vote and it didn't pass at the ballot box. And part of the feedback that we heard was a lot of parents in the community were worried about the town hall money competing with turf field money. And it's a tough kind of comparison between the two projects, at least for me, because I think they're two totally different things. But a lot of times people see them as competing for the same money in their pocket, which they really are. But the town hall project is a kind of an immediate need for us. And the turf field, I think, is a need for the high school as well. But the turf field kind of working group in the school committee, I don't know if it's still on your number one priority list or where it is in the process. But my guess would be you're probably 3 to 5 years out on a turf field. I may be just kind of guessing there, but the group's been around for a number of years now and it hasn't had much traction and there's not much fundraising for it. And what I would kind of like to see is us working together to kind of talk about issues like that, because I think that we had a lot of people voting for either turf or a town hall. but there's really no turf on the immediate horizon. So it was kind of a keep the money in their pocket and hopefully something happens. But, you know, I want to help with that information and communication with, if the school administration, the school committee says, you know, listen, that Hamilton's doing a town hall, we're still 3 to 5 years out on fundraising for a turf field, you know, then I think more people would have voted for the town hall project. And there was kind of I don't want to say misinformation, but people were thinking it was in competition with each other. And I think that's part of the reason why we had so many votes against it, was because that was a lot of talk I saw on social media, was it was either a town hall or turf field. So kind of us getting together and doing that kind of talk about capital planning would really help everyone kind of succeed. It would help us succeed with our capital projects and timing, help the school committee, and we would even help with, you know, talking about the turf field at the town level and stuff like that. So keeping that dialogue going, I think, is important.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that what actually got voted for last spring was not to fund a master plan, right? It was actually to fund a feasibility study at the elementary level and then update an existing field usage study, excuse me, which would be that turf field, which, you know, I just want to remind that the basis of the start of this turf field project was actually to alleviate field usage throughout the towns.
Right.
And then it was just, you know, found out to be there. So while these are, you know, sort of products within a master plan, I just wanted to clarify for the record that it was actually a feasibility study and then a field usage study that was what got funded. But I'm in complete agreement with you that we do need to sort of get together to make sure that we're getting that message out, because, you know, that was a shame that didn't pass.
Tom Younger.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure working with everyone here. Been here 2.5 weeks. I've known Joe for a few years, so it's a good relationship working with him here. For those who really don't know me, Joe knows this. I'm a huge regionalization person. I've been that through my career and working with small towns, even on larger communities. One thing I'd like to work with Joe on, and I haven't actually talked to my rest of my team, so I don't mean to be surprising you off of this, but when Joe's mentioned capital, I'd like to look at, if any, it's probably doubtful, but if there's any shared capital we can do on equipment or anything that you're looking at between our communities. That's something that we've done in the past, and I'd be very interested in working with Joe on that in any way we can possibly increase our regionalized services on that also.
And Tom, I'll say one comment to that I don't know how many years, it's been a handful of years now, but we had a Collins Center report on a lot of regionalization of the towns with police and fire and DPW and stuff. If you haven't yet, I would look into that. And Michelle, just kind of a point of order. I know that Peter, I see him waving his hand there. He wants to say something.
Right. I thought we were going in order, so I just wanted to check now with the Board of Selectmen in Wenham.
No, I think we're good on that information. Thanks for the details. And certainly, you know, as Tom said, we're interested in regionalization and anywhere we can affect economies of scale between the two towns and with the school.
And then anybody from the Wenham FinCom have any questions about that information?
The only thing I would add in a positive, a working note is John and I have been communicating fairly routinely over the past month or so, talking about our mutual interests and our mutual concerns. And we have had several discussions about the library, which we both serve, and we're both kind of pleased that there's a good, solid working committee looking at that roof and the recreation department roof and solar panels and how that all might add up in the future. But the FinComs will, John and I are looking at the FinComs maybe meeting sometime in the middle of January, the latter part of January, to put our heads together and see where we're at with a number of issues.
Peter, for the school committee.
Thank you. It was just touched upon by Mr. Younger, exactly what my question is. I mean, I've learned a lot on the school committee, and what I've realized is that, you know, both towns and the regional the district, you know, our budgets are really fiscally conservative. There's no excess. And that I've been saying for a while now that we have a revenue problem, not a budget problem. But my question is two parts. Is there any openness in the two towns merging into one town? And has there ever been any studies about what the savings would be, realized if we did?
I believe there was a 2010 DLS study by the state that proposed several, 2009, 2010, something like that. I know I was at MAPC at the time. I know I was at MAPC at the time. It was hot reading for all of us, municipal policy geeks. They made several recommendations, I think, that both towns were looking at the time, but I don't know. Not a lot of it has come to fruition. You know, I'm like Tom. I'm a big regionalization guy. It's actually one of the things that I worked on when I was way back at MAPC, and that's how Tom and I first crossed paths. But it's a lot harder sometimes to get deals done, even when you have two willing parties. There's so many different things that go into it, and I'll continue to work with Tom and the town of Wenham on anything that they want us to look at. We just have to make sure it makes sense for both towns. You know, the other thing I would caution is that my goal when I enter into a regionalization project is to create at least better efficiency. And, you know, that could mean same amount of money being spent, but better service. It could mean, sharing the cost and having a little bit of savings on both sides, but not losing service. But it's not a panacea. Just because you merge things, unless you have a reduction in positions, you're not going to really see a tremendous decrease in spending. A case in point, a successful regionalization that the two towns did right before I got here, which I've been a part of for the last almost 2 years, is the Inspectional Services Department. It actually grew the budget for both towns in inspectional services. It meant more revenue too, and it meant far superior service. I'm happy with the regionalization. The little things, the first 3 years we want to tinker with, we want to make some changes, but overall I'm happy doing the regionalization on inspectional services with the town of Wenham. But it will continue to improve it, but it didn't save us money to do that. It actually, on the town of Wenham, on the town of Hamilton side, we're paying quite a bit more than we were paying before. Again, we're getting better service for it. I'm fine with that, but regionalization doesn't just equal cost savings. So we have to be cognizant of that.
Even if it's phased in over years, is that kind of the plan right now, is to item by item start phasing it, merging?
Yeah, there are a lot of things to look at though, but if you look at, for instance, larger departments that were, and I'm not going to mention departments because I don't want anybody to say that, oh, the town manager Hamilton said we should regionalize blah, 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 and everybody's going to set their hair on fire tomorrow and start giving me a hard time. We won't mention specific departments, but if you were to look at trying to regionalize services in a larger department in one of the two towns, right? Those larger departments generally have unions. Our union scales aren't the same. So if I go to regionalize that service, the folks in the union where maybe they're not getting paid the same hourly rate, they're going to want to come up to where the guys in our union are. But then our guys are going to say, well, why do they get raises for doing nothing? We don't get a raise. It becomes very complicated very quickly. And I'm not saying that's a reason to stay away from it. I'm just saying we need to be cognizant of it. And sometimes, especially in the larger regionalizations, it's going to take a little bit of time. So I just
Jackie,
throw that out there.
Well, and I think to Joe's point too, I think inspectional services is a great example of where we did see a service challenge and we worked together to improve it. And I think something that was really lovely at the time, I was here at the time of when we first started putting it together. And at the time, our FinComs were doing a liaison role. We had subcommittees, and we were doing a lot of communication between those two groups. And I think based on this conversation tonight, we're in a position where everyone's at the table tonight, everyone's eager to have the discussion. And I think when we went to the table with shared inspectional services, there was a similar environment, a similar context. So I think it's helpful for us on the staff side to know that there's interest and to know that everyone's interested in coming and having a conversation, because then at least everybody's at the table and can speak to their needs and their desires when we go into a regional program of that nature.
I just like to point out that, Jackie, as young as she is now the person longest tenured in either town's upper manager level. So, I love having her historical knowledge here. That's great.
Thank you. I just honestly believe we have a revenue problem.
To add something to that.
yes, Nick, and then we're going to have
Peter. I'm actually very excited about the fact that you brought this up. It's something that I've been asking about for about 10 years or 8 years. And this idea of merging, on the plus side, it's always something that I think makes sense for two small towns. On the negative side is that if we were to merge, we probably want to merge with Beverly because they have less problems than we do, than you do. You know, that's the downside of it. So, but I think the objective, if we can be doing exactly what Jackie said, working together to look at different opportunities, I think it's to the best interest of both towns to do that. There are overlaps there, and there are also certainly duplications that we have and that maybe we can eliminate. The problem is, I think somebody mentioned it before, we don't have an expense problem, we have a revenue problem, and both towns have it. And that's the biggest, that'll be the biggest challenge for both towns to get over.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
I'd just like to make a quick comment, if I may, about in response to the revenue problem sort of description. I also view there as being a revenue problem, and I think the revenue problem is we impose too great of a tax burden as our primary source of revenue on our residents. So I don't want to make it sound as though we have too little revenue because we can't squeeze any more out of our residents because we're close to the point on a statutory basis when we won't be permitted to raise taxes anymore. And we, of course, do not have the zoning, as we all know, in Wenham for much in the way of commercial. So we've got what we've got, and so be it. But I would also like to recognize, as Joe, you took the words right out of my mouth, so I don't need to say them, with respect to it not being a panacea regionalization, but you do get better service, and it pays dividends when not inspectors, contractors had a great experience, as mine did with Jackie and her former office, and they will do jobs in Hamilton and Wenham again as a result. I think we all know they're very busy and will say, forget it, I'm not coming back to these towns if it's a headache. And Jackie was largely responsible for implementing that strategy, obviously, between the two towns. So we're totally pleased with it. Another opportunity would be things like the emergency services and the ambulance pilot, which was then formalized and became a formal plan in Wenham. Obviously, different strategies and approaches there. The one thing I want to say with regard to the regionalization is I think we need to explore opportunities definitely, but then be willing to say, this is a non-starter. Let's not spend our precious time and effort on a particular item and move to others and be quick to drop them. And so I just stood up a minute ago because I have the fire report right here. If anyone wants to read it, Jim, I have to get it over to you. But it's great reading, and there has to be a want, because oftentimes there is not immediate, tangible economic savings that come to fruition. So the towns have to want to do it, and that's a very difficult thing to assess, right? Because it's so subjective and what do people want in the end. But anyway, thank you. Just wanted to make that point.
Just to add to what Alex said, or just I didn't mention it in my earlier remarks. We're looking very carefully at the mill rate for Wenham. We're approaching, we don't have it exactly set, but we're approaching $20. And as everyone knows, 25 is the cap. How soon will it take us to get there? Hard to predict, but at the current rate, it's not that far off in the future. So we're looking at that very carefully. It has obvious challenges for any community. Could I just not change the subject, but ask the school department a question at this point, Michelle? Is that?
Yeah. Why don't we let Anna ask her question and then we'll come back to you, Jim.
Thanks, Michelle. It's sort of a question, sort of a comment on what Joe and others have just said about all of it. I think about the regionalization, I like the idea that, that's one approach to it. The full merger is sort of, top level, but then there's certain agreements you could do. I also think it's good to think about particular things. There could be a revenue sharing agreement that's particular to some projects. So I like the idea that we're all thinking really broadly about the layers of regionalization. I think that the thing that I wanted to say on, sort of big picture, short-term, long-term, I think the fact that this group is having this conversation at the level we are is so valuable. And I would love to find a way to do this on a really regular basis, whether it's all of the full boards together, despite the scheduling difficulty, or some sort of working group. But I love the fact that this body is talking to each other this way, because I feel like I'm looking at the screen and I'm seeing all of these brilliant people who care so much, and I feel like we can solve every problem. So I just want to say that. I mean, I think for me, from my perspective, is that to me, the no override thing is a really major sticking point this year. As painful as that's going to be, I just feel like politically, I don't see how we can get through that. So I know on the school side, that's going to be really difficult and involves some tough choices. You know, that's just what it is. But I don't see how that we get through that. And for me, that sort of gets to this underlying issue. And Jim, that was the thing I was going to talk about, is that Wenham especially, but now Wenham, if Hamilton is marching to, we're reaching a point where we're actually going to hit the ceiling, whether we wanted to override or not. We're just going to hit a wall. And to me, that's the really big elephant in the room, is the fact that even if I thought an override strategy was viable, which I don't think it is, I don't think it's good policy, there's an actual legal limit. And unless we address the underlying structural revenue issue on both the school side and the town side, there's literally no more money. So it doesn't really matter what we want, we're going to be stuck. And I would love to see us start working on those underlying master planning issues. And I would say from the school side, with or without the MSBA granting process, and I know that Tom has put in for it, and I know we have a capital plan, but part of me says the towns have an obligation to solve this problem itself. And if the state doesn't come through, like, this issue is only going to get worse the more it's been delayed. So I would have loved to see that master planning process 10, 15, 20 years ago, but I think we need to start it now and address those revenue issues, because both towns are going to be at $25 per thousand within a couple of years, and then we're just done. So philosophically, I wanted to throw that out, and I'd like to see us really think about those elementary schools consolidating, what we're going to do with our buildings, and then redeveloping those structures for something that's actually going to produce revenue. So.
Jim, what did you want to say?
I had a question.
Mhm.
So this is to Vinny and Mary Beth.
Ooh, he stepped away. Give him 1 second. He's coming right back. There he is. He's back.
Oh, Vincent's back. Okay.
He needed to get something to clear his throat.
You knew I was going to ask a question, Vinny.
Yeah.
So last year, if I don't have the numbers exactly, but I recall that under 766, the school department was had I think unanticipated over $900,000 bill for out-of-district placements. And looking at the enrollment, Vinny, Mary Beth, am I reading it right that we have 10 less children in special ed programs in this year? And will that roll over into 22? Am I correct in that, or am I reading that wrong?
That's correct. 10 of your resident students are no longer out of district.
So does that put less pressure, less demands on our special ed out of district placements going into 22?
Yes, it would.
One of the things that I will share about that is that those numbers can be very volatile, right?
I know.
So the way, and I'm sure you've had this conversation before. So, you know, what we are always trying to manage is that we can have students that move into the district that we are required to provide a high level of service for, and we get a phone call, and all of a sudden that's added to our budget. And we can also have students internally that we find need specific types of services. So that is a big ticket item in the budget, and it's also one of the most unpredictable areas of the budget.
Mary Beth, do you that decrease in the special ed students, do you think it was COVID related at all, or is there a possibility that this is sustainable and that certain programs are working that
I will say that our special education department has been working hard, and we are continuing those efforts as we speak. Actually, in some meetings this week about improving our intervention services that we think will have a long-term impact. But this budget, the out of district budget is very, very reliant on individual students' needs. And one of the things that I would share, so for example, if we had a family that decided to homeschool but had a special education student, we are still responsible for providing those special education services even in a homeschool environment. So that I think probably a combination of both, John, that there has been some sustained effort to build out some programs. And then part of it is just the individual children that are walking through our doors. At a certain age level, students age out of district placements. And so depending on how many students you have in a particular year, that can impact the number as well.
Great, thank you.
I just had one question. It didn't sound to me like Wenham and Hamilton had the same assumptions about state revenue. And I was just curious if there was some talk about, it's the same state, same budget, it's going to come in at the same. Are you guys having any sort of talk about making the same types of assumptions?
I'm sorry, as far as state aid?
Yeah.
Generally, most managers and administrators are very generally conservative, waiting to see what the governor's budget comes in at the end of January. So seeing managers putting in for a 20% reduction in state aid is not unusual. That's almost a general practice. I go to you, Joe, if you say it generally.
Yeah, I think that, Marissa and I went around and around on this several times. One of the things that challenged us was that how late the FY21 state budget got passed. I mean, it just happened a couple weeks ago. And amazingly, they wound up not hurting us. They had told us back in May and June that they anticipated cuts. It took them so long to get through that they wound up not cutting us. I appreciate that they didn't. But what we saw in September and October reporting from the state as far as their revenues, particularly in some of the areas that are impacted by the economy, sales tax and what, they're way behind. So that we're going back to what they were telling us in May and saying, all right, they were projecting that because of a reduction in their revenue. We're actually finally seeing it. It had just happened 6 months later than they expected. So we're expecting that they're going to have to balance that loss of revenue in the coming year. So we went back to the 15% that we had been hearing about in May. We felt it was the most wise thing to do at this early stage. I'm not sure. Yeah, they just finished the budget process. I'm not sure how quick they're going to jump into the FY22 budget planning at the state, because they've still got to deal with the COVID crisis the way we do. They still have to deal with the fact that they're trying to balance things related to the pandemic and loss of jobs and loss of revenues across a lot of different sectors. I think they've told us that they're probably going to be later than usual. So I'm not necessarily anticipating that the House 1 budget is going to come in the third week of January like it always does. So we had to put a number there to start planning purposes.
So we've invited Brad Hill to come and speak to us on January the 19th, because he is possibly thinking he's going to hear some stuff around the governor's budget around that time. So certainly would invite you guys to join us in that.
Thanks.
The other thing,
Michelle, isn't the 20th, the night of the 20th is our meeting?
Maybe it's the 20th.
Okay.
19th might be something else going on. I don't know. I remember that's the day that came out in my mind. But whatever the Wednesday is. Also, just wondering, Mary Beth, if you could give everybody the date that we expect to have our first sort of budget preview.
Yeah, the first budget preview will be at the first school committee meeting after the holiday break, which will be on January 6th.
And then we should probably schedule a time to get together before not too long after that, just to kind of really think about getting our ideas of budget targets in alignment then versus fighting about it through the spring, because I don't think it does the community good for it to be the schools versus the towns versus this. Do I vote for that override or this override or that thing or this thing? And it would be great if we could kind of like set targets. So Jackie, what would you like to say about that?
I just would request, I recognize it's a really big challenge to get this whole group of people together. Last year, it was a little bit tight for us in terms of the number crunching. So if we can try to have this group come back together, a good 2 weeks after we get that initial school budget, that would be a big help for us in terms of being able to process that and start to incorporate it into our projections.
Okay.
Just
So
in
that
terms of timeline.
Probably be mid-February-ish. So,
And Michelle, I think
everybody available for Valentine's Day? No.
Well, and Michelle, if I can add to that and sort of pick up on what everyone's saying, and I want to go back to something Sean said with the Hamilton Town Hall vote, which, I was disappointed too. I voted for it. I supported it very much. I think you have to look at the underlying psychology that led to so many people saying, I have just this tiny little bit of extra and I'm going to pick and choose what I do. I think we really have to unpack why do people feel that they have so little margin? Because in a town like ours, you shouldn't have to choose between schools and a town hall. I mean, they're both needs. And I think that if this group can work more closely together to not exactly market the budget, but to show that we're in alignment, I think it will bridge those gaps, because the reality is we need a new town hall. We need these new schools. We do need a turf field. We actually need it all. And I want to get back to that point of, if you only have this little bit of headroom, how can we address that so people don't feel so positioned? And I guess I do sort of want to ask a question as a takeaway of, like, everyone's talking about these revenue and the capital and the planning, like, what's the actual next step? Is that a working group? Is that this group coming together? Is that the town managers and the chairs? Like, I want to put some sort of stake in the ground, because instead of just talking about it, how do we actually move that in an actual way forward? Not just say, wow, we have to talk about revenue. Like, how do we move it forward?
Joe?
Yeah, if I could just add on to what Anna says, any of those ideas, Anna, for us to continue working together, I'm okay with. We've done informal with the town manager, town administrator, and superintendent have talked last year. We tried to get some way towards more collaborative budget, but we were still challenged at the end of the day. I think that if we're, I know the regional agreement requires us to meet so many days before, and then that's so many days before you guys get the budget and the school committee level. So we need to look at the agreement, figure out what that date is, and then between now and then, if we could have at least one or even two, and it doesn't have to be all this whole group. Maybe if you all feel that this is too unwieldy, at least if it's not going to be everybody, I'd love to have two, where the senior administrator from each of the three bodies and the chairs of each of the three committees and maybe one other, and something like that. But just have us working together, have us collaborating. The chairs of the committees and one other member from each of the committees, and myself, and Mary Beth and Tom, and I think that we can make a lot of headway. We'll bring our finance directors, Vinny and Marissa and Jamie should all be involved.
Well, I think that for me gets to that group think idea, where if we all get together and really work on it, that I think we can overcome this and sort of build that consensus we need to, and whatever. And ironically, I mean, there are so many elected bodies here. Like, we are the leadership of these two towns. Like, this constitutes the elected bodies of Hamilton and Wenham, minus maybe the planning board. They're the only people that are not here. So if there's going to be people who solve this problem, it's on us. And I would personally love to be involved in that.
I just want to say one thing that is might not be apparent is that this is going to be an 8 to 10 year project on getting schools built. So we need to start like yesterday to do this.
Agree with that.
It's not imminent. And we really need to use our time very wisely. We need to start planning. There are certain short-term things we can get done, but the big things are going to take some time. So we have to really start like now. We really do.
Yeah, it would have been great to start 20 years ago. I agree with you, Jesse.
One of the things I had shared with Joe is that when the Miles River came on, Wenham, we also had the library come on, and Wenham also did a big water project. So we had a lot of projects all in one time. And so our taxes went up a lot. Well, why did it go up a lot? Because we did everything at once instead of a staggered plan. So if Hamilton can get their town hall off the ground and running, it allows more capacity for borrowing for the turf field, the sooner that can be done.
Well,
So
one other thing that people may not realize about the turf field is that we have an escrow. Hamilton has over $500,000 in escrow for a turf field. However, and that project is going to be about a 5 to 8 year project, believe it or not. But we can't do anything with that money until Wenham kicks in their part. And the other complication is that it cannot be used, this money cannot be used for artificial turf. So there's going to have to be some discussion about how and why and when for that too. That's not a short-term fix. That's more of a medium-term fix. Where the schools are 8 to 10 years, the turf fields would be more like 5 to 8. Unless we can get a campus that has turf fields, like maybe Longmeadow. I don't know if that land is still available, but it would allow us to consolidate an elementary campus and then free up the land to do rezoning and maybe commercializing in Hamilton. But yeah, we have a lot to do and we need to start right away.
If I may just add something briefly to Darcy's comments, I'm not sure about the accuracy of the money can't be used for artificial turf, but that's I have to look into that. But with the talk about consolidating the campuses and stuff, and the Longmeadow comment and Winthrop School lease, when that was up the last round, the Hamilton Board of Selectmen, we really wanted to only give a 5-year lease, but we compromised with a 10-year lease on the property because we're really looking seriously at that property for commercial use. The planning board is looking at starting to rezone that area for commercial use. And also, the talk about Cutler School and doing something with that campus, will all be part of our master plan that we'll be starting to work on in the very near future. So having this open dialogue with the schools and getting that conversation started and talking with the state, because I know we had all the schools looked at a few years ago. And I think we're coming up on another eligible round of having things looked at, would be a good conversation to have in that kind of future casting of that area of town.
Well,
and Mary Beth probably has an update on that because she knows it's been delayed.
Yeah, so we did apply for MSBA last year. In a typical year, we would have heard by December as to whether or not we would be invited into the program. They have postponed informing towns how they are moving forward and whether or not they're even going to take on a cohort for fiscal year 20. What they are telling us right now is probably the March-April timeframe. We will hear whether or not they are moving forward with fiscal year 20 projects, and if so, whether or not we're invited into them. And at that time, we'll also know whether our current application will stand for fiscal year 21, or if we would have to do another one if we're not invited in. What they would be doing if we are invited in is they would definitely be looking at all of our schools, particularly Winthrop. It is a Cutler project, but they would be walking through Winthrop, and I think that they would recommend some level of bringing those two schools together into a single entity. So stay tuned. I think we'll have more information in the spring.
Thanks for the update, Mary Beth.
Hi, Tom.
All right. Just to go back to what Anna had said earlier, and haven't met you yet, but
I know. Hi, Tom. Nice to meet you.
Hi, glad to meet you. Hopefully I'll meet you sometime outside of the Brady Bunch image we have here with each other. But what you said, I totally agree with about working as a group on our short-term and long-term goals. I mean, I'm a short-termer here. I'll be here 4, maybe 5 months, depending upon how long they get a full-time administrator. But we've done this before. It's very successful because you come off with a plan, as you were talking about your master planning and such. You know, that's a different aspect for communities, but coming out what we can determine, what's important to Wenham, what's important to Hamilton, and what we can do to be going forward, because this is not a short-term plan. This is long-term. The issue is, and I think a couple members here had stated, we have a revenue problem. Yes, we do. It's a revenue challenge, not really an expense problem in certain cases. In Wenham, I can just speak for our team here. We're not overstaffed. You know, I mean, personnel is usually one of the major costs in a budget, but we're not overstaffed here. Everybody here is literally doing 6, 7, 8 different functions. So how do we produce the revenue? The revenue comes from planning. There is no thank you, Natick Mall. There is nothing like that coming on the horizon. Wenham is generally a residential community. Hamilton, pretty much so, I would also say. So how do we do that through planning? What can we do in the short term? What do we do as far as long term? Those discussions have to occur, and then we have to move forward. We don't take that plan, put it on the bookshelf, and it sits there for 10 years. And then 10 years from now, we say, my gosh, we're getting close to $25, per, thousand. What are we going to do?
I think we already did that once. Like, that's the thing, we burnt that time. And one other thing that no one else has said, the two other things I don't think anyone else has said, is that planning actually helps protect the open space that so many people care about as well. We care about these services, but a good plan will protect the open space. The other elephant in the room that I know I've heard Sean mention it before, I've heard Gary mention it before, I've heard David mention it before, is some sort of long-term OPEB strategy for the district. I think that that's something that we need to revisit again as a group, and put our heads together. And Tom, I love your enthusiasm. I mean, I want to solve these problems yesterday too. I think Darcy and I don't always agree, but I think we actually agree on this stuff, which is exciting. So, yesterday was too soon, and I want us to move together, because we're gonna drown. We're not gonna make it this way, and then no one can afford to live here.
I mean, planning's important, very important.
So, did you want to say something, Gary?
Yeah, just saying, I think the action item coming out of here is, first, I'd like to see, let's set a date to repeat this, maybe the last third of January, somewhere in there. I know we have the big Saturday meeting in Wenham for all the budget stuff on the 9th. And certainly by the third or fourth week, we should have more clear numbers if the other two parties can too. So let's set a date.
Yeah. Do you want to do that now, or do you want to do that through email this week?
Let's try and do it now if we can. At least we can narrow it down. We can always change it if we need to.
We got everybody here, pretty much.
Right.
Do it.
So Michelle, pick a date. What's your calendar? You're probably
So I wanted to ask Vinny, the date that you settled on for the tentative approval is in February, right?
Let me pull it up. Give me one second.
I feel like sometime around the.
Michelle, I've got the budget development calendar. I can share my screen quickly if you want to take a look.
Why is the date of the 26th screaming to me? Oh, I know what that is. Never mind. That's the negotiations meeting. So, yeah, can you scroll down a little bit?
February 3rd.
February 3rd. So we should probably try and meet around either right before that or right after that. That's when we'll approve our tentative budget. So maybe we want to talk about this 28th or 29th.
What's the outcome, right? Do we want to be able to pivot from a decision made with this group?
Yeah, I think there won't be enough time, David. That's a good point. So maybe it should be after we approve the tentative before we approve the final. So we would say February. So February 4th, February 9th, February 11th, maybe February 8th. How do you guys feel about that week of February after we give you the tentative budget?
I think that's fine. I think if we pick one of those dates, I'd like to go into it with the understanding that Michelle, maybe you, Mary Beth, and Joe and Tom, the interim in Wenham, can have some conversations kind of in process to kind of give some kind of feedback and information to our board, so that, when we get to that point, we've got some information and some dialogue has happened.
Right. And I think organizing this ahead of time is helpful.
We should We should email or go around, have everyone read prior also the report from 2010 as
Yeah,
a starting point.
We can get, you mean the DOR report?
That and the
The
report Alex
2009
also
DOR
showed.
feasibility study, David.
Yeah.
I have that handy. I can forward that to the different chairs if that's
Yeah,
helpful.
I think it's on the Hamilton website too. I just want to throw out
It's
for
on the way
scheduling.
back machine too. You just
Yeah.
go way back and you.
For scheduling purposes, it looks like, because I know Hamilton BOS is usually Monday and Wenham is often Tuesday, but that week, the Wednesday, the 10th is unusually not a school committee night. So Wednesday, the 10th might be a day where potentially we could kind of look at, I'm just trying to remember everyone's calendars.
I think that sounds good.
How you guys feel? Okay, so write it
That should
down.
work.
Yeah, if the FinCom, if the Hamilton FinCom holds its regular schedule, they would have been having a meeting on that night anyway, because they've been going every other week. So that would
We're
be
actually shifting that, Joe,
What's that?
in the new year. So I think we started our first meeting on the 6th. So
Oh,
that's
okay.
an off week for us, but we'll otherwise be available for it. So that'll work.
So February 10th, we will all get together and then we'll have like an organizational meeting before that. So it'll be good to go.
Sounds good.
All right, so we're going to be spending quite a bit of time with Joe this year as we go through negotiations. So he'll be easy to coordinate with and looping other people in too as well. So, all right, fantastic. Would the Hamilton Board of Selectmen, go ahead.
I'm sorry, hold on one second, Michelle. Vinny looked like he was raising his hand a second ago.
I was just confirming it was the 10th at 7, you said, right? Sorry.
Yeah, I think
All
so.
right.
Yeah. So
Thanks,
with the
Dave.
Hamilton Board of
Thank you,
Selectmen to adjourn.
I would entertain a motion to adjourn, but just before I do that from my board, I just wanted to mention, since we kind of have all the brain trust here, that and Gary, we met with the Wenham BOS. It's been a little bit of time now, but we had a great joint meeting. We talked about a lot of kind of shared services and stuff like that. And one of the things that we brought up was the regional agreement. And it kind of takes 3 to tango with that regional agreement. So I wanted to let everybody on the school committee know that we're thinking about looking into that regional school agreement and updating it, since it is fairly out of date. And so kind of putting a bug in your ear that would like to kind of start to tackle that over the next year or so. So that's my 2 cents before I adjourn here.
Do you guys already have some sort of like subcommittee put together, or should we?
We don't, but we have, we've talked about it for kind of years, and we have kind of a lot of things that, for instance, our town government has changed in Hamilton. And that's still in the agreement in our own kind of town administrator format. And there's a handful of other things that we think are either deficient or need to be kind of updated. So
There's some
we
language.
have kind of a laundry list, but we haven't started a real subcommittee or to talk about it yet. We kind of wanted to start the dialogue with everybody.
That's cool. I just wanted to see where you guys were, so we can.
Be honest about this with you. We've got our 3 contracts to settle. We have to reinvent education one more time, again, at least maybe twice. And there's a lot going on. We are committed, however, to starting a process in the
and to your point, Michelle, I'm not looking to fast track it and just make it happen overnight. I think it's going to be a longer process. Because we've got 2 towns and a school administration and committee all involved in it. So it's not going to be a 6 months process. I think it's going to be over a year or so. We're going to have to go back and forth with it and negotiate the whole thing. So
it's best practice to review that about every 5 to 10 years. So we're well due to do that. So yeah, we are committed, but it's not going to be before town meeting.
Right. No, I don't expect it before town meeting.
Okay.
I just wanted to bring it up so that we know that it's on the kind of horizon. So
Fantastic.
That's why I wanted to see where you were on it.
You get to go, Hamilton, if you'd like to adjourn.
All right. Does somebody in my board want to make a motion to adjourn for us?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right. All those in favor?
Say your name out loud, so it's a roll call.
Darcy Dale, aye.
Jamie Knutson, aye.
And myself, Sean Fair, aye. Thank you, everyone.
Joe reminded
guys.
me of that this week, so I didn't want to let that pass by. And Hamilton FinCom, would you like to go?
Like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
I could have somebody.
All right, let's take a roll call vote. We may have lost David, but we gained Valerie. Start with you, Val.
Valerie McCormick, aye.
Nick Tanson, aye.
Christina Shank Hargrove, aye.
And John Prulidge, aye.
Great.
I hear a motion, make a motion to have the Wenham FinCom adjourn. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Seconded. All those in favor? Aye, Jim.
Aye, Susan.
Hi, David.
Did you lose Alex, maybe? Okay.
I think Alex had to leave at 8:30.
Right.
And the Wenham Board of Selectmen?
Board of Selectmen, I'll make the motion to adjourn. John, do you have the second?
I'll second your motion, Mr. Chairman.
And the affirmative vote? Gary,
Aye. John, aye.
Adjourned.
Great. And Dana, would you like to make a motion for the school committee? Press the space bar.
I move that we adjourn the evening.
And second?
I'll second.
Second by Anna. Vote, Anna.
Sure.
Michelle,
Yes.
David,
Yep.
Peter,
Yes, please.
Julia,
Yes.
Dana, Lara,
Yes.
Michelle Bailey, yes. Thank you very much. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
And thank you,
very much.
everybody.
Awesome
Thank
meeting,
you.
guys.
Thanks,
Take care,
everyone.
everybody.
Thank
Good
you.
meeting.
Thank you.